So very happy to be with you here today. It is an exciting time for Title IX. With the 50th anniversary, everyone should go out and get their stamps at the post office. They're pretty cool. And there's been a lot, I think, in place to kind of celebrate and commemorate the 50th anniversary. It's a short statute, right? Some of the documentaries that you can find are about these few words and how they changed our country. It does cover a great deal of conduct and compliance issues. I want to focus in on some of the areas that are likely to impact you the most in your roles. But it does prohibit traditional sex discrimination, different treatment on the basis of sex, and then more recently has narrowed in on issues of sexual harassment and sexual assault on campuses. Kind of evolving from, right, I think in our country traditionally an understanding of this being about equal opportunity in athletics. Before joining Husch Blackwell, I was an attorney with the Office for Civil Rights, and so spent a great deal of my time sort of enforcing Title IX in addition to the other non-discrimination statutes. And so now at Husch have a unique opportunity and privilege to work with institutions in preventative efforts and responsive efforts when there are alleged compliance issues. So first, of course, for athletics considerations, equity in athletics, this may come up in a OCR complaint, in litigation. Sometimes institutions choose to address these sort of issues internally in a preventative way, right? Sort of taking inventory of issues like participation, financial aid, and treatment. I'll talk about that at a high level. And then, of course, sexual harassment and the focusing on handling alleged cases of sexual harassment and sexual assault on campuses. So equity in athletics, I'm sure this looks familiar to many of you, about participation, about equitable financial support, and about equal treatment, known as the laundry list, when comparing sort of various factors and how they are applied to student athletes. Again, potentially you've dealt with this in an outside enforcement, or perhaps internally, kind of taking, as I said, that inventory of each of these issues. And of course, in your roles, right, you're likely to either be in or coming into positions where you can sort of influence internal inquiries about these types of issues. And then with respect to sexual misconduct, so there's been really quite an evolution with respect to enforcement and regulation related under Title IX from the Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights, about institutions' obligations when it comes to these types of allegations. And I think in this particular area, it's important to note that there are elements of Title IX compliance for which the institution is solely responsible, right? Their obligation to ensure equity in athletics, they're making decisions that affect that. When we're talking about instances of sexual harassment or sexual assault on campus, it's not the institution that is engaging in that conduct, but rather the obligation of the institution is to have an appropriate response to that allegation. And that comes in the way of both the grievance procedure that the institution has and implements, and then also in the response. And I think, in athletics, there's obviously a really important role that you play, I think, on both of those fronts. Number one, the reporting that comes, to you, to your staff, that needs to get escalated and submitted to the Title IX office. And then also, in terms of that response, I think athletics is in a really unique position to help prevent and remedy issues of sexual harassment and sexual assault when it comes to trainings, for your particular student cohort. So these are some of the changes that have been implemented since new regulations in 2020. And again, don't need to get down in the weeds, but I think, again, at a high level, understanding your obligations within athletics to report and help respond to these types of complaints. Oh, I went the wrong way. So again, we had regulations effective as of 2020, and that no doubt resulted in some changes on your campuses in terms of policy redevelopment and the way that these investigations and resolutions are handled. Again, to varying degrees, you may have played a part in some of that, but just at a high level, it's important, I think, to understand that. And then there are also issues related to when institutions will address allegations under the Title IX policy, or when they will be potentially dismissed under the Title IX structure and investigated through other student conduct policies or staff or faculty policies. And so what the regulations did was put in specific situations when institutions have to or may sort of refer Title IX sexual harassment issues to other policies. This is work that your Title IX coordinator at your institution is doing. And I think, again, the key here is understanding those folks on your campuses who are engaged in this and being a partner with them, in terms of reporting and then providing, potentially information that's needed to make these types of decisions. Sometimes to a Title IX coordinator, it's not immediately apparent how it needs to be processed. And so sometimes there can be what we call a little I investigation, where they're really just trying to get more information about what happened and who's involved. And so there, right, you may be called upon to be a partner to that Title IX office and provide some of that information. In terms of, FERPA, we're familiar with the federal law that protects student records and allows inspection of student records. Here, this is just to highlight that when it comes to Title IX issues, issues of sexual harassment, sexual assault complaints, we have the same obligation to protect the confidentiality of the issues that are raised in that context. But if there are situations where, there will be situations where the institution needs to share information in order to effectively carry out its investigation, its response to these, sometimes very serious allegations, and that in those situations, the Title IX obligation to have that effective response trumps, the student record protection. There's also sort of issues with how institutions may limit the ability of students or staff and faculty to discuss an ongoing Title IX matter. And so there are, one of the things that the regulations focus on is an equal right for both parties to be able to present information in the context of one of these investigations. And so an institution can't limit that opportunity, but can reiterate to participants that there is a line at which a person may be considered to be interfering with an investigation or a resolution of this type of matter, or they may be engaging in conduct that they think is, within their free speech right, but which in itself could be harassing or retaliatory, which would be prohibited. So this is another, kind of piece of institutional policy to help kind of explain that to the individuals who are involved and the administrators who are overseeing it. So in terms of practical advice, I think the first is to always be aware of your reporting obligations. When you learn of alleged sexual harassment or sexual assault, and it may come, to you from a student athlete. I think it's also really useful to sort of take inventory of those in your departments who are likely to receive these reports. Your trainers, your counseling, your counseling services, which may be confidential or may not, sort of depending on that. But your trainers, your assistant coaches, your managers to some extent, and then maybe on up to assistant coaches and coaches. But making sure that all of those who are involved in the department, especially those who are most likely to sort of get these types of reports, understand that reporting obligation. I think partnership with the Title IX coordinator and the Title IX office, both with respect to these types of responses is really important from an institutional compliance standpoint. And that's both because it helps with, I think, the prevention and the response aspect, to which I said, of course, athletics plays a really important role, I think. but also making sure that there's consistency, in how these types of situations are handled, and if there are unique situations, as there often are related to student-athlete situations, that there's coordination and collaboration with that office in terms of what will happen in the interim, what may happen, as a result of the investigation. What's next for Title IX, at least with respect to the regulations related to sexual harassment and sexual assault? The administration and the Office for Civil Rights has now submitted notification of its intent to provide amendments to the regulations. I think it will be yet a year before we see any kind of significant change, but we can anticipate yet another note and comment period about changes to the regulations. And so that will be forthcoming. And again, I think your Title IX office and your deputy Title IX coordinators who may be sitting in this room will be very much, aware of that, and then kind of adjusting policies institutionally, and then training, on any changes to the requirements. Okay, well, that was very quick. Sorry about that. So we have just a QR code for getting our alerts if you'd like, if you don't already get them. We do webinars periodically that we're happy to have you attend. And it's very nice, by the way, to be back in person after doing 2 years of these types of presentations looking at little screens. So anyway, so please feel free to sign up for any of those, and thank you for having us.